Hello, class. Hey, it is chapter 16 today. We are almost through this book. So we'll figure out what happens in detention with Beaver and Sam. No talking, no laughing, no screaming, no whispering, no sleeping, no eating, no drinking, no chewing gum, no toys, no games, no puzzles, no word scrambles, no Sudoku, no electronic devices, no non-electronic devices, no cooking, no baking, no defrosting. Does that sound like somebody you know? As Mr. Copeland read off the long list of rules as outlined at Horace Hotwater Middle School's official after-school detention policy, I could feel a thin skin of dried glue still coating parts of my face. Despite what Jared Kopernick thought, I didn't enjoy the sensation of peeling it off. It was my first detention. For the next 2 hours, it would just be Mr. Copeland, Beaver Vanderkoff, and me, a standoff. I stared at Hamster-saurus Rex, crouched in his cave, looking hungry. He gave a low, pitiful. Could he feel the tension in the room? I snuck a glance at Beaver. He scowled at me so hard it looked like his face might break. Slowly, Beaver extended his index finger and pointed, despite the no-pointing rule, at Hamster-saurus Rex. Then he drew the finger across his neck. I turned away. In the event that a student disobeys any of the stated detention rules, that student will earn 2 extra detentions to be served at a later date. These future detentions are cumulative. If the student is unable to serve all detentions because he or she has graduated from Horace Hotwater Middle School, these detentions will transfer to whichever high school the student subsequently attends. In conclusion, discipline. Mr. Copeland took a deep breath. He had finally reached the end of the rules. Beaver, obviously you've heard this many times before. Did you get all that, Sam? I opened my mouth to answer. No talking, said Mr. Copeland. I closed my mouth and nodded to indicate that I understood. Fantastic, said Mr. Copeland. If you need something from me, write it down on a piece of paper. Then raise your hand. I will come by and read your note. He smiled, cracked open a can of seltzer, and leaned back in his chair. Do you hear that? I shook my head. Exactly, said Mr. Copeland. Utter silence. At home, my family talks over me. My next-door neighbors are always hammering things in the backyard. Here at school, I have to listen to you kids ask question after question all day long, only occasionally interrupted by ear-splitting bells. Detention is the only place where I get any peace and quiet. To tell you the truth, this is my favorite time of the week. I nodded to indicate that I understood. And now, as always, I plan to read the newspaper, said Mr. Copeland as he unfolded it, and drink a nice cold seltzer water. He took a sip and frowned. This seltzer seems to have gone flat. Both of you wait right here while I get another one from the soda machine. And in my absence, don't do any of the 146 things I just mentioned. He stood to leave. Beaver grinned. This would be his chance. I raised my hand and frantically scribbled something on a piece of paper. Mr. Copeland came to my desk to read my note. It said, "Please let me buy you a seltzer. It's the least I could do after my shameful misbehavior earlier today. You should relax, Mr. Copeland. You work so very hard to educate us children." He squinted at the note. Ugh, this sounds like something your new girlfriend might write. I opened my mouth to protest. No talking, said Mr. Copeland, but okay, you are hereby granted permission to buy me a can of seltzer. He handed me $1. I walked extra slowly to the soda machine. I needed to run out the detention clock. This isn't seltzer, said Mr. Copeland when I handed the can I brought to him. This grape soda. I scribbled another note. Sorry, the buttons are right next to each other and I have large thumbs. Let me rectify this terrible mistake by returning and buying you the correct beverage. Seltzer water. All right, said Mr. Copeland as he read it, but hurry up. He handed me another dollar. Beaver looked like he wanted to kill me, even more than normal. Once again, I made my way to the soda machine. This time, I really did purchase a seltzer, but I walked back so slowly, I would have made Wilbur Weber's snails impatient. It took me 10 minutes to travel the 100 yards back to the classroom. Sam, you took so long that I finished reading the newspaper, said Mr. Copeland, annoyed. He tossed it in the recycling bin. This detention is my me time. Every Monday, I enjoy a seltzer and read the paper simultaneously. Now I have to go find something else to read while I drink this. Both of you, wait here. He stood up to leave. Again, I raised my hand and frantically scribbled another note. It said, sorry again, Mr. Copeland. Please let me try to make this right by going to the school library and selecting something interesting to read while you enjoy your cold beverage. P.S. You earned it. You're a great teacher and a very cool guy. Mr. Copeland frowned as he read it. Okay, fine, he said, plopping down in his chair. Go get me a book, maybe a spy thriller, but funny? Beaver was stewing as I left the classroom again. My plan was working. Maybe he wouldn't get his moment alone with Hamster-saurus Rex after all. It took me a while to find an espionage comedy in the school library. Day of the Cackle, 1973. Thank you, Sam, said Mr. Copeland as I handed him the book. I've heard very good things. It's supposed to be more exciting and even funnier than the 39 Ukes. I smiled and took my seat. Only 45 minutes of detention left. It was starting to seem like Hamster-saurus Rex might survive the day. Hungry though he might be, the little guy looked calm and collected inside his cage. Mr. Copeland stood up. But now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go to the restroom. I'll be back in a minute. Again, I raised my hand and wrote a note. Mr. Copeland read it. Sam, I really don't understand how you going to the bathroom for me would work. He crumpled it up and tossed it in the garbage. Just then, Beaver raised his hand. Mr. Copeland walked to his desk and read his note. He turned it sideways, then upside down. Some of these aren't letters, Beaver. But if I understand your intention correctly, you want to go to the bathroom yourself? Beaver nodded. Fine, said Mr. Copeland. Beaver stood to go. I hadn't considered that he might want to leave me and Mr. Copeland alone with Miss Hamster-saurus Rex. What was he playing at? Beaver returned 5 minutes later and took his seat without a word. What do you think he's up to? It wasn't long after that when I smelled smoke. Is something burning? Cried Mr. Copeland, sniffing the air. Hang on! As he leaped to his feet and dashed out the door. In an instant, Beaver was at the pet catch pro. Hamster-saurus Rex sensed danger. His tail whipped and he bared his fangs. Beaver grinned. I didn't think you had the guts to get a detention, Sam, said Beaver. Too bad you still can't do anything to stop this. In fact, it's better this way. You'll get a watch. He grabbed the cage with his good hand and shook it. Inside, Hamster-saurus Rex snarled and puffed out his chest. Come on, Beaver, I said. You don't need to hurt him. Together, you and this hamster ruined my life. People used to be afraid of me. Now they call me Urinal Head. They laugh when I walk by. Hamster-saurus Rex was only trying to protect me, I said. I'm the one you should be mad at, not him. Beaver shook his head in disgust. That might be the saddest part of all. You're nothing without this hamster, Sam. It's just some weird loser with no friends who draws little pictures. It stung. Maybe because he had a point. Now, just like Wolfsplosion 3, said Beaver, turning back to the cage, this is going to end with violence. Beaver, please, I cried. Don't do. I felt a flash of pain as Beaver socked me across the jaw. The next thing I knew, I was lying on the floor, dazed and blinking. Hamster-saurus Rex. Not so scary anymore, said Beaver. Come on out, Martha Jr. He pulled on the locked cage door. It didn't budge. Beaver grunted and pulled harder. Nothing. He put the cage on the floor and put his feet on it and pulled as hard as he could. The pet cat Traz Pro held up. It was as good as keeping the mutant hamster in as it was of keeping raging bullies out. You're not getting off that easy, cried Beaver at last. He jammed his fingers through the tiny gaps in the bars. For a moment, Hamster-saurus Rex's eyes met mine. I swear the little guy winked at me. Right before he chomped on Beaver's finger. It's a picture on the next page, too. Ah! Beaver squealed, ripping his hand back. The tip of his finger was bloody. Hang on. I know how to get inside that cage. He threw open the drawer of Mr. Copeland's desk and began to rummage through his stuff. After a minute of this, he stopped and grinned. The key caught the light as he held it up. At that moment, we both heard a noise down the hall. Beaver swore, dropped the key, and slammed Mr. Copeland's door shut. Both of us scrambled back to our desks just in time. Beaver, said Mr. Copeland, furious, his hands covered in soot, his purple and red parrot tie singed at the end. Did you start a fire in the water fountain? Beaver shook his head. Mr. Copeland took a deep breath. Look, I might not be able to prove that you did it, but I know it was you. So let this be your final warning. Beaver Vanderkopf, if you misbehave just one more time, you're suspended from school. Is that clear? Beaver nodded to indicate that he understood. Mr. Copeland noticed the cage key on his desk. He picked it up and put it into his bag. Mr. Copeland didn't dare leave us alone again, even for a second. The rest of detention passed smoothly. Hamster-saurus Rex glowered at Beaver from inside his cage, but Beaver didn't try anything else. 5 minutes to go. I breathed a sigh of relief. The little guy would live another day. But right before it was time to leave, I saw Beaver scribble a note. Instead of raising his hand, he simply left it on his desk. He'd written it for me. I palmed the note as I walked past and only unfolded it once I was riding home in the car with my mom. It was only 3 words. Tomorrow. Final. Revenge. Remember, Beaver's real smart. He's definitely a good speller. All right. Hey, it's almost to the end. I wonder what's going to happen. What about Smiles Corp? What about his science fair project? How is this all going to wrap up? All right. See you tomorrow.